Now, way back before Fantastic Beasts was announced, I was really pushing for a prequel about the Hogwarts founders. I like the idea of bringing these characters to life that we've really only heard fables about. It's a great way to still be in that wizarding world, but keeping Harry Potter separate and intact. I really wanted a new story with new characters. Now, we almost got that with Fantastic Beasts, but the series went from Newt's story to now Dumbledore's story, and I'm not really a big fan of that. I want something completely separate from the Harry Potter story. That's why I think the founders would make for an interesting film or series. I mean, they are still iconic characters who seem to have godlike status within the wizarding world. It'd be really interesting to humanize them and see them how they actually were, not surrounded by those myths. I am going to get to casting like I always do, but first I want to explain the world that we're setting them up in. They created Hogwarts in the 10th century, and everyone knows the broad strokes of their story. 4 founders coming together to build a school unlike any other, and they coexisted and ran the school for many years, but eventually a rift began to grow between Slytherin and the other founders. Godric Gryffindor was actually the main force of that disagreement. It appears that they had a massive duel before Slytherin left the school forever. Now, every hardcore Harry Potter fan already knows this story. Although it might be new for some, I want to make sure that people are still getting surprises when they're watching this film on screen. Therefore, I'd like to frame a story that takes place in 2 timelines, and in parallel stories. One where we see these founders, young and able. We see them meet, come together, and really make Hogwarts. And the other side of the parallel story is the fall of Slytherin from Hogwarts, where we see the founders aged and mature, and we can see the relationship falling apart slowly. If you've ever seen Blue Valentine, one of my favorite movies of all time, I recommend seeing it. I'm kind of framing it around that, which has you see the beginning and the end of a marriage. This would give us an opportunity to explore their dynamic within the founders, and how it evolves throughout the years. As well, we'd see a little bit of a glimpse of them in their prime. Gryffindor and Slytherin being at the forefront, as they always are, but we see how these friends and pretty much family disagree and separate. For this video, I'm going to be casting 2 versions of each character. One around the age of 30, maybe 35, to see where they are and where they came from before they formed the school. And the second around the age of 60, to see the characters that we know from those portraits. It is also worth noting that this period of time does not have a ton of information on the characters, or the details about the school. Most of the information actually comes from the Sorting Hat of all things. So I kinda will be filling in gaps and providing little character details to help flesh them out that really isn't in that source material. So take everything I say about the characters with a grain of salt, because I'm going to try my best to really flesh them out and expand their character a little bit. I am going to be casting only UK actors, as the original film series did. I also did recast the original Harry Potter films in another string of videos, so for argument's sake, let's say that these 2 take place in the same universe. Therefore, I won't be reusing any of those original actors I did in the main 7 videos. So if you're wondering why I didn't use a specific actor, make sure you check out those. So without further ado, let's cast the founders of Hogwarts. First up, we have Helga Hufflepuff. I went with her first because let's be honest, Hufflepuffs sometimes get forgotten. I believe that actually Helga is one of the most important roles to cast. She wouldn't be the main character, but she's probably the most important in the dynamic of the 4. She would be the peacekeeper, the one who would really rein in the ideas, egos, and really mediate. She would be fiercely loyal to the 3 of them, and maybe the only one who truly gets hurt by Slytherin leaving the school, and the only one who really shows it. I feel like there's an idea of Hufflepuffs almost being the stoners of Hogwarts. So I want to show her character having forcefulness and sternness that can be accompanied by the traits that Helga would embody. If I had to compare her to a character that's already in the franchise, it would be Molly Weasley. It's not a perfect translation because I don't want her to be as loud and outspoken, but I don't think she should be afraid to speak up. It's more important that she has that loving nature always coming through as Molly did. That motherly warmth, even in those screaming matches, is incredibly important. I can see Helga being the hardest working of the bunch as well. While the others may have had magic come easy to them, she's persevered and really studied and practiced to get where she is. Now with 2 actors being casted, you obviously want to see the character grow and change throughout the years. I feel like the younger version needs to be more fierce in nature, and then with age she softens and becomes more motherly and welcoming when being surrounded by her students. Now I know Helga is originally described as being round and plump, but I feel like that necessarily isn't important to her character. She is gifted at food spells, and if we wanted to, the actor could put on a few pounds if they wanted to meet that physical description, but I don't feel like it's a necessity. I feel like embodying the character is more important. For the younger side of this character, I went with Claire Foy. She would do something really wonderful here. She's been so great and shown so much in The Crown. She has a tremendous acting ability to do the heavy lifting in these scenes when the four of them are arguing. But more importantly, she has that softness that shines through in the role. She puts on a demeanor that's stern, but you can tell deep down she's a softie.
There's a delicate matter, which I felt I needed to discuss with you in person.
Concerning what?
Your position.
My position?
Yes, your position as Prime Minister.
And she has everything I'd like to see in the younger version of Helga Hufflepuff, who's a character who I feel that should be out to prove something. So Claire Foy as young Helga Hufflepuff. As for the older side of this character, it's somewhat important that the actress actually looks something like Claire Foy, and also looks something like that portrait we've seen on the walls of Hogwarts. But more importantly, and above all else, she needs that energy. You know that energy I'm talking about. That Helga Hufflepuff energy that is accepting of all. The softness, the warmth. She needs to be someone you can talk to. I feel like she still should be a little bit stern around the other founders, but she's incredibly loving to her students. She's the teacher you have a heart-to-heart with. Now, I think there's one perfect choice for this role, and that's Emily Watson. She is amazing. She can play sweet or demanding, and she really shines through in Chernobyl. She's been an amazing actress for years and years and turned in some really incredible performances.
Iodine 131. It's not military, it's uranium decay, U-235.
Reactor field.
Who's the next closest?
It's Chernobyl, but that's not possible. They're 400 kilometers away.
Oh, that's too far for 8 milli Rontgen. They'd have to be split open. Maybe they know something.
I have no doubt she'd knock this role out of the park. So Emily Watson as Helga Hufflepuff. So there are two versions of Helga Hufflepuff. They are both on the shorter side, which is perfect since Helga Hufflepuff should only be 5'6". And I think they look enough alike that I don't think there'd be a question of who's who. But more importantly, they have the characteristics that I see for this character. The more stern side with Claire Foy, and then the softer side with Emily Watson. Next up we have Salazar Slytherin. Now I feel like Slytherin should be our main character in the series. The name of Slytherin is always associated with evil, and I just don't want to buy into that. I want to show Slytherin as a much more complex, misunderstood character. He's not Voldemort in pure evil. He does not need to have an evil, snarling stare and really be the villain of the franchise. In fact, I don't think this franchise needs a villain at all. I want to show Slytherin as a character who's affected by his past. I want to show his resourcefulness, and show his rise to becoming a powerful wizard on his own sheer will. I want him to be prosecuted by muggles, which makes him not trust them. But more importantly, I want the audience to side with him and to understand his thought process. His story should be the focus of the series. If I had to make a comparison, it's similar to Magneto in First Class. You don't always agree with his thoughts and his actions, but you understand why he does them. I also want to see the breakaway from Hogwarts in his older years be as devastating for him as it is for the others. He's not evil at all, he's just someone who's so strong in his beliefs. Now with Slytherin, his casting is tough, because we need a character who transforms. One who, although is damaged early on in his life, finds a friend in Gryffindor and a brother, before they eventually have a falling out. I also need him to turn into almost a loner as he gets older, someone who's more solitary, and becomes lost in his own way. Now for the younger version of this character, it makes sense to have Slytherin mimic almost Tom Riddle's upbringing. Maybe a street kid who has no one else to rely on. The difference between him and Tom Riddle is that when Tom turns to the dark side, there is no coming back. I want the story arc for Slytherin to go from him not needing anyone to him finding a place in a family within the Founders, and then finishing off with him feeling betrayed and going back on his own. It's really kind of a Greek tragedy. Therefore, for the younger version, I want an actor who can show that darker side of the character, but then show him come into the light. I think Anirin Bernard would be great at this. Although he isn't as well known as some on the list, he's really a star in my eyes waiting to happen. I first noticed him in Dunkirk, but he's turning in some really amazing performances.
Our lives are a futile struggle to make sense of the senseless.
He can really do a lot with very little dialogue, which I feel is very needed for Slytherin, who is probably less willing to talk out his feelings.
Look, I really appreciate what you're trying to do, but I'm past help.
So Anirin Bernard as Salazar Slytherin. As for the older version of Slytherin, we need to see the character a little bit more familiar to what we know. The cold, hard, menacing man. He needs to have the gravity on screen since his transformation is the hardest to sell. He needs to show us that he is unwilling to compromise. When his heart he wants to stay, and his love for the Founders. It's a real internal struggle to portray on screen. We need a veteran actor. That's why I went with Mark Strong. We've seen him in roles where he shows off his eviler side, so we know he can do that, but it's in roles like Kingsman where we see a different side to him. He shows warmth. I think he can bring that menacing side as almost a wall that's kind of hiding that warmth inside him. I think he has the acting ability to pull off that transformation and do really well in this role.
Who is he? Beggar man? Thief? Why doesn't he look this way? Wouldn't you if you saw a bunch of boys flogging a car around a field? What's the matter with him? Doesn't he like us? Good luck.
So Mark Strong as Salazar Slytherin. So there are our two Slytherins. At first glance, they really don't look a lot alike, but they do share some features like the defined jawline. More importantly, they have what it takes to bring this character into the light and back into the dark to make us really understand him, understand his thoughts in that journey. Next up, we have Rowena Ravenclaw. Her and Helga had a great friendship, which lasted for years and years. I feel like it just makes sense to have Ravenclaw be calm and calculated, someone who's poised more than the others. She should think before she speaks and be very deliberate and elegant with her speech. She does have a large role in bringing Hogwarts to life, since she had a dream about naming the school and the location. Her role should be one of action within the group. She is the one who really thinks things through. Her future with her daughter could give potential storylines later on, but I don't think it should be tackled within the first story. I think we should stay more focused on the Founders themselves. Now, for the younger version, I feel like an actress who can really show off her intelligence is obviously important, but one who feels well studied. I feel like Rowena, coming from a higher class family, would work well for the dynamic of the character too. So we need an actress who can pull that off. With a touch of I'm better than you attitude would also work well when she's younger. I went with Katie McGrath, who is more well known for smaller projects, but I've seen her face pop up time and time again and within series I watch. I did watch her in a very small movie called Leading Lady, which really showed me what she could do in this role.
Tears of the world are a constant quantity. For each one who begins to weep, somewhere else another stops. Same is true of a laugh. Let us not speak ill of our generation, for they are not any unhappier than their predecessors. What do you think Samuel Beckett meant by this?
She is also a spitting image of what this character should look like, and should be given this chance to really bring her to life. So Katie McGrath as young Rowena Ravenclaw. As for the older version of this character, still be very strict and intimidating while in the classroom. She no longer sees herself as above others, but she's still very proud and a little bit unwilling to admit she's doing anything wrong, but still have that calculating nature. She needs to be more wise and diplomatic when talking, and bring that intelligence. I went with Rachel Weisz for this role. She's been one of my favorite actresses for a very long time, and she's made a really interesting turn in her career in roles like The Lobster and The Favorite. I can see her playing this role to perfection.
No.
I don't understand.
Did you take it? My book?
No.
I think you are a pretty little lie that I have misjudged.
I did not mean for this to happen.
Go back to Mrs. Meg and tell her to find you a position in the scullery, and if she asks why, tell her because I am a disloyal little bitch.
And if we do eventually go down that rabbit hole with her daughter, she can really portray that sadness within while still acting normal.
You can understand me. Like hell you can. Mummy found herself in the same situation I'm in now with you, not once, but dozens of times. She always pretended not to know.
She'd be great for this first movie, but as well throughout the series. So Rachel Weisz as Rowena Ravenclaw. So there are our Ravenclaws. I think they both fit the dynamic of the character very well. I think this would allow for a fully formed character. Maybe now we can finally understand why her symbol in the crest is an eagle. Lastly, we have Godric Gryffindor, the man who seems to have as much of a following as Dumbledore himself. He is definitely put on a pedestal from past films and really should be seen as a leading man. I want him to play into this but show his shortcomings. He shouldn't be all brave and heroic. Rather, sometimes he should be nearsighted and be too quick to judge. I think Gryffindor needs an ego and has a need to be the leader of the group, but sometimes jumps in too quickly with 2 feet when it always isn't the best course of action. But I think it's important he's the moral compass of the group. He is a little thick-headed and stuck in his ways. Now for the younger version, we do need that stereotypical leading male. Strong, tall, and that lion-like mane of red hair. We need an actor who can show that leadership quality and really put that ego on. One that chooses the sword sometimes in battle to give the opponent a fighting chance. He should start off that way, but then kind of find balance and really learn from his companions. I went with Sam Heughan for this role. He is a little bit older than the others I've cast, and I don't think he necessarily looks it. He has that look that is important for Gryffindor, and I think he has the ability to pull this off. He is best known for his role in Outlander, but hasn't really broken into the mainstream completely. He's been in comedy as well, which is great if we really want to play up Gryffindor for a little bit of humor.
In our line of work, being with someone, caring about them, it makes your job harder. So if Drew was trying with you, then that was real.
I think he has the dramatic chops as well as the comedic chops to make this role his own. So Sam Heughan as young Godric Gryffindor. For the older part of this role, we need a mammoth actor. We need someone who has that turn, but also that bravery to stand up to a lifelong friend and confidant. He needs to have the look as well, but be more worn and past his prime. Still, his ethics and morals are very much in place, and he's not afraid to defend them. We need an actor who's so sure he's right that it's almost painful. I think Sean Bean is the obvious and the best choice for this role. He is one of the best English actors to never appear in Harry Potter. He has played similar roles to this in the past, but there's no denying he would knock this out of the park.
You want me to serve the woman who murdered my king, who butchered my men, who crippled my son?
I want you to serve the realm.
Cersei knows you as a man of honor. If you give her the peace she needs and promise to carry her secret to your grave, I believe she will allow you to take the black and live out your days on the wall with your brother and your bastard son.
You think my life is some precious thing to me? That I would trade my honor for a few more years of war?
Him and Mark Strong would be at odds, and I can almost see the tension building in the room and the duel that would come following. I can see him being stern, proud, ethical, and everything that Godric Gryffindor needs to be. So Sean Bean as Godric Gryffindor. So there are your two Gryffindors. Two different sides of the character, but an interesting story that I think they can both pull off. So there is my Founders of Hogwarts. I kind of made it a lot harder on myself, having to cast two sets of actors that somehow had the ability and still look somewhat like each other. Let me know how you think I did, and let me know who you'd like to see in these roles. If you enjoyed this, please check out my Recasting Harry Potter series that I did earlier. As always, thank you to my patrons Adam Gray, Jeremy Jacobs, Jenny Edwards, Gabe Marchondig, Colleen West, Marco Perry, Roland, Andy McShane, Shalon Hudson, Kieran Hunt, Joris Conan, Brendan Warner, Sweevy, Alex Tao, Derek B. Bell, Jacob Wolf, Alexander Gardulo, Rachel Kilker, James Rogers, Archie Steffen, and Gregor Davidson. Thank you for your support, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.